So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us Rob Martin, who's Managing Director of Care Services at Anchor. So, firstly, Rob, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Anchor, what you do, and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. So, good morning, Chris. So I'm Rob Martin. Yes, I'm the Managing Director for our care services at Anchor. I'm also an Executive Director with the organisation. My primary role is responsibility for the running of 121 care homes, some extra care sites, and some home care, and some work within villages as well. So a real blend of social care in there. Yeah.
Wonderful, and as we've spoken before, and it's obviously quite personally important to me. I came up to you at an award. You just won a care award, and I'm just so pleased that my mother, as you know, is in one of your homes down south. And what I have to say impressed me, Robin, and you've got 120 care homes. I don't know how many people that is, both you're looking after and how many staff. But I remember you said specifically straight away you knew the home, and you knew that the cook, the chef there was great at a particular thing. And I forgot what it was. What was I seem to remember those scones, I think, was their speciality, which I must try when I get down there.
Just any home baked goods is
Brilliant.
Always delicious. And yeah, she's a very good cook. And I liken her to you know when you used to put back in the day, and everyone popped round to the grandparents on a Sunday for a lovely roast dinner with a beautiful winter's pudding. She just cooks so well and is so creative with her food as well.
Wonderful. So before we sort of go into a bit more about your business, Barrett, what does it take to know that? You've got 120 care homes. I can't imagine how many people at that. So how do you know that?
Yeah. So it's several thousand colleagues that work across our care homes, and I go to great lengths to make time to understand individual stories. Now, I call these golden nuggets. So each home that I visit, I love. So I'm a really emotionally engaged person.
Yes.
As an individual. I love working with people. And so I think that's a sort of prerequisite to this job to really enjoy the interactions, really enjoy spending time around people. And these are really important things to learn. And so I take a great deal of time to understand in each of those 121 homes what makes them special, the characters that exist within the homes. I get to know them, and you only get the opportunity to do that by spending some time around these services, keeping your ear close to the ground, and just digesting information. Yeah.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So if we sort of look backwards for a little while, Rob, could you tell us a little bit how you got into business, how you got into care, and how you got to this position over time? What and why care for you?
I'll try and attempt to bridge what is an incredibly long story, as I'm sure it is for many people when they get to this point in their career. So yeah, I actually left school and joined the armed forces, and at 16 years old, I went to the apprentice college in Reading and to take a trade within the army.
Yep.
And yeah, I spent several years traveling the world with the British Army. I spent some of those years in Germany, some in Canada, and some back in the UK on ceremonial duties. I even found myself firing the 1 o'clock gun at Edinburgh Castle at one point. So yeah, I had quite an exciting career in the military, but had decided that I wanted a change in career. And at that point, I knew even then that I wanted to work with people. And so I went down the HR route. And one of the first jobs I had when I left the army was integrating 2 NHS trusts as a project manager within a HR function. I can't say that was the most enjoyable break into civilian life and working what I call regular employment. It was a tough first piece of work where I wasn't exactly popular. It was a difficult job. I didn't really enjoy it, but it taught me an awful lot.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a good experience. So I first broke into social care a couple of years later, where there was a director that was just desperate for somebody to take on a crisis service that just wasn't functioning. And a lot of people had walked out and the manager had left. And you could just picture the scene, you know, and that all equated to a really poor standard of care being delivered that was inconsistent. And so I just seen that as an opportunity to turn something around and do something that I could actually really get my teeth into and enjoy and actually feel like I'm doing something positive and making a difference. So I took the risk with no social care experience and jumped into the home manager role. I actually started, because I was contracting at the time, I started within a couple of days of being offered the job. And I remember walking into that job and having to go to the job centre to find some people to work with me. That's how dire things were. But we fast forward a couple of years and I turned it around. I got a really good team around me, and clearly, you know, all those people skills that I'd developed through the forces and through some of the contracting work that I'd done. And of course, I'd grown some more skills in that time as well. And yeah, I recognized how important it was to take people on a journey with you, how important it was to have the right skills mix when you're trying to turn around a problem, and to really value people, recognize them, and in order to get the most out of them. So that was a huge learning experience for me. But of course, when you do something right and do something well, they want to, an organization or a larger organization wants to be able to continue using those skills where where it makes the biggest impact. So that set me in my trajectory from a registered manager in social care to where I am now.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you mentioned the people skills. What other things, what other skills or disciplines have you brought in from your forces background into business in general, would you say?
So this might sound quite cliche, but I can do attitude.
Yes, no, it doesn't at all.
I might make light of something which is a very serious matter at this case, but at this point, but I kind of wake up each day and I think, well, we're not being shot at. So everything else feels quite digestible. And I know that sounds like right on the extremis, but it's a useful mantra, and it just reminds you that no matter how tough things get, and no matter how hard things get, as a leader, it's really important that you're seen to be calm, composed, in control, and always have a route to take people with a plan. And I definitely learned that through the forces, through a really strong, clear leadership in the forces and the way that it operates. It requires good leadership within the military to keep everybody focused, and even when the odds are stacked against you, to recognise that there is always a way forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And looking as you've grown your career and working with Anchor and growing Anchor, what are some of the biggest challenges and issues you've had to overcome?
Many challenges and issues. Inevitably, working with people is inherently complex. You know, so I've spent a lot of time learning about sort of bias in the workplace, be it unconscious or conscious bias. How that affects the way in which people work and interact. That the truth to a certain extent, when you're working with large groups of people, can get quite muddied because it's interpretation of truth, it's interpretation of a reality. And so I find that that's one of the most complex areas to overcome, is being able to navigate relationships, being able to navigate those complexities. And bias that exists in the workplace in order to get the job done. And getting the job done for me is about creating an environment for vulnerable people where they feel safe, where they feel cared for, and where we can make a difference to their well-being and independence. So, I don't need to create a narrative or a story to motivate people. That exists. Uh,
Yes.
it's there and it's obvious. But actually, it's colleague to colleague engagement and keeping that on a
Yes.
level that becomes really critical.
Yeah, no, that makes it makes absolute sense, and it's as you say, there's the desire to help and get help people is clearly there. I guess it's balancing. I guess it must be quite difficult to balance that desire to care at the highest level with running a business. I mean, ultimately, a business is still there to be profitable. I guess
Yeah.
those two things must be quite difficult, especially for your role.
Yeah, absolutely. But I always say, I've always again followed the principle and adhered to the principle that you've got to get the quality right first.
Right.
Everything else follows. Don't spend time worrying about the bottom line. Spend time worrying about meeting a customer's expectations and indeed exceeding a customer's expectation. The rest will follow. It's relatively simple when you think about it in those terms. We think about case can be a really complex area, but when broken down, it's it's no different to the experience we would have visiting a restaurant. And you walk in, you're greeted with a smile, you're made to feel welcome, you feel like a VIP because you're given the table of your choice. There's no delay in service. The food that comes out looks fantastic, but even more important, tastes fantastic, and it costs less than you expected for the quality that you've received. Cares a lot like that you've got to work to exceed standards, and that's about the quality baseline. It's about people being trained appropriately and trained well to be able to give a great service standard, but also be able to provide that absolute quality service. If we're able to do that, then clearly the rest takes care of itself in terms of the profitability.
Brilliant. Brett, I interviewed. It's going back a year or so now. The owner of a chain of restaurants in Leeds and York, and he said something very similar. And I remember him saying it to me because I love the way he described it. He said, "Chris," he said, people work hard for the money they spend with us, and therefore they deserve to get the best, as you actually said, the best quality service, best quality food, and the best experience. And similarly, obviously, the people you look after have worked hard, and you're providing that level of quality of service and care, which is wonderful. And when we're good at doing that, as you say, the rest looks after itself. And that's the same with Oscar, the guy that I mentioned, the restaurants. He just said, look, my job, irrespective of the outcome, is to look after people, and ultimately everything, then the business looks after itself. And speaking of business in general, what are some of the biggest learnings you've had about running and growing a business?
You never stop learning, I think, is the key here. Learning happens every single day, and use the wisdom around you. Don't try and do it alone.
Right.
Surround yourself with a good, loyal team that will work shoulder to shoulder with you, and give them the respect that they deserve. I've got a lot of time and trust for my team that work around me, and likewise they lend me that trust back and that respect back. That's a critical part of it. Have succession plans in place. Encourage growth is a really important part of that as well, which aids retention. Having that respect and honesty is really important. Listening, I know again that's something that's probably spoken about a lot, but I placed a lot of emphasis on that. There's one skill that I learned in more recent times, and I've actually been applying it to a degree, but I never really called it out, and that's I love the mantra of extreme ownership. And what that is ultimately as the managing director for several thousand colleagues, if someone fails, it doesn't matter who it is, if something goes wrong, ultimately I'm responsible and I should own that. Because somewhere along the line, at some point, I've clearly failed to be clear enough about something or failed to do something a certain way. So I will start from a position of owning the problem and not just blaming someone else within my structure for it. So it's important from an external point of view. So for a complainant or for someone, it's really important for them that I take ownership for that, irrespective as to whether or not I was in the room at the time, or I was there when the event happened. So that ownership's really important externally, but also internally, it's really important that colleagues see that you take ownership for it, and as a result, they're actually much more likely to take that ownership back off you themselves, and take more accountability for the problem. So it shifts the relationship and behaviors, and again, just lifts that level of respect that people have. And it's not that I'm following a textbook and doing this. I'm doing this because I feel it's important. I feel I should own these things. That's what I get paid for. And also we'll just keep repeating the same failures if I don't take responsibility for it.
Absolutely, If we talk about blame, excuses, and denial, if we go that route, nothing changes. We're being a victim of circumstance rather than owning the problem and therefore changing the outcomes for the future. Wonderful. And I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether it's business, sport, life in general. Who's had the biggest impact on you, Rob?
You know what? Every leader I have ever worked for or with has been a great coach for me. So I can reference the without giving any names away, because that would not be appropriate. But I can reference the experience that I had where I had a really terrible experience working for someone, and that experience taught me so much. There's lots of how we define as red flags that come up every day. And I could see this borderline bullying going on with colleagues. But then a different relationship held with me because of that belief that because I'd served in the military, that probably this person probably should not try it on with me. But I was able to observe some of those behaviours that were being pushed onto other colleagues. Now, I did call those out, and rightly, and I think that's one thing that I've always carried, and one thing that I learned very early through some of the work that I'd done within quality assurance was just be brave, have that confidence to call something out. And I think that the fear, and I'll call it the fear, because I spend a lot of time thinking about whistleblowing and things like that. How do we encourage people to speak up internally so we can catch something and address it? But a lot of people have this fear. It's the biggest fear is, what if I lose my job? What if I lose my income? Then I lose my house. Then I lose my social standing. I lose everything. And so it often stops people from calling things out. And I always say the distinction is about the manner in which you call something out. And I think you've got to go through a escalation process, and you've got to make those decisions based on what's in front of you. But you've got to call these things out. You have a duty to do it. And if you act in the right manner, your job will never be in threat if you do the right thing. Ultimately, if you're working for the wrong employer, you should probably be looking for another job anyway. But I learned so much, in terms of from other leaders that I've worked with. I mean, again, I'll call out some of the best leaders that I've worked with within Anchor. It has a great long-standing history of CEOs. So the leadership with an anchor, again, has been great for my personal professional development as a leader, and being able to strike that balance.
Brilliant, wonderful. And whether it's from them or other places, do you have any favourite quotes or sayings that you catch yourself using on a regular basis?
No, I avoid them at all costs.
Fantastic.
I'm not going to be tripped up in that way by any of my teams rolling out cliche comments or statements. I do try and avoid repetition, and I think that's a good thing. I should say it's probably a useful segue to the point that I don't consider myself as academic or as someone that's come through the academic route to leadership. My route to leadership has been largely organic, working up through a structure or a system. And I have been fortunate enough to go on formal programs and learning programs. But what I tend to do is that I'm an emotionally driven leader, and so I tend to work off people around me and reflect the people that I'm working with to get the best out of them. So I tend to pick up and reflect, mirror things back on people, as opposed to riding out my own sort of the office management style textbook phrases or quotes.
No, that's fine. I like to collect them. I have picked some quite good ones up over time, but no, that's absolutely great. And you mentioned, you've obviously clearly reflect on yourself quite regularly, but what else have you learned about yourself so far in your journey?
I learned a lot about the fact that you should really pay attention to things that have affected your bias throughout your whole life. So, I grew up in a small town in a small county in Fife, and I was relatively isolated. I'd never gone abroad for a holiday until I joined the forces at 17. So obviously I had to broaden my views when I joined the army and really, really get my head around cultural differences and things like that. So I recognized that I had an unconscious bias that through my upbringing, and really had to work hard on that, really had to work hard to really neutralize that and overcome that unconscious bias. But the first step is recognizing that it exists,
Yes.
So I always say that's, as a leader, self-awareness is key. And when I talk about self-awareness, it's one thing exhibiting behaviors or giving quotes or having those foibles, like things that you do and ways in which you behave. But actually, it's a whole different level to tap into your unconscious bias. So this is pre-programmed into your brain, and has you behaving and acting in a certain way and making decisions without an acknowledgement or recognition that you're making those decisions. So with bias. And so as soon as you're able to acknowledge that happens, it can transform the way in which you conduct yourself, because it's that pause. It's the pause that you take to consider, and am I making a fair and informed judgment here, or is this being led by my unconscious bias right now? And when you acknowledge that, it can be transformative.
Absolutely. And is that something you learned, or something that did you learn? You say you're not academic. Did something you learn, or just realised that maybe my views, my bias existed?
No, I was fortunate enough that to attend the King's Fund Top Manager Programme, which is predominantly open to NHS executives and aspiring leaders, senior leaders within the NHS. I know in recent years they opened it up to social care. So I took the opportunity to attend that year-long programme, which it's again, a leadership program not based upon academia, but based upon social interaction, Tavistock principles, and just really understanding yourself better. So that was the formal learning, but paired with all those experiences that I've had through my military experience to working with people, and particularly vulnerable people, that you know, make up all of our society.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I know within sort of when I'm coaching clients, we often talk about most of the decisions we made or our view of the world is mainly beliefs rather than necessarily truth. So we all have our own beliefs, and it's understanding that you know, what's the evidence behind that belief. When we find people stating their belief as a fact, it's actually okay. You can undermine strongly held beliefs that aren't helpful with evidence. But that's really interesting. So looking forward to that, Rob, what does the future look like for yourself and Anchor, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
There are a number of challenges that are ongoing within the social care space. It's well articulated through media and press. The underfunding, it's social care crisis, as they term it. The challenges that we face now and in the future, whether it be workforce challenges, that funding issue, the pressure on the NHS and appropriately discharging people into appropriate care and support, and the move to further investment in technology, and of course AI, are you know, common challenges that sit across all sectors and all businesses at the moment. So lots of challenge in front of us. For me personally, I think I've still got a big job to do at Anchor. So, you know, there's a number of things that I'd like to do. I've been through a very busy period of growing a number of care homes. So I've made acquisitions and opened new care homes, one of which was award-winning, luxury care home award-winning. So for us, it's about continuing to drive up the standard. It's about getting a consistency and approach and continue to be sector leaders in all aspects.
Brilliant. And what advice would you give to anybody who was thinking of going to business right now?
I'd encourage people to continue to do so. So I love hearing about new ideas, new business opportunities that emerge in every day. Of course, I get the opportunity to speak quite routinely with people who have set up new businesses, particularly around technology in the social care space. And I get really excited because there's a lot of great minds coming into this sector and adding value. And I'd say you've got to make sure that you pick the right thing that you really are passionate about, that you care about deeply. I think that's really important because you will succeed if you've got that behind you. Something that's marketable, and a business area that's marketable in this day and age. I mean, I actually there was a story the other day where near my home, unfortunately, a bookshop closed about a month or two after opening. But it was this individual's passion, but they'd failed to understand that, of course, the market shifted, and and you know, people now, if they want to buy a book that's paper bound, they could probably get best price on Amazon, sadly. Or of course, you know, you're competing with Waterstones in the high street that's diversified, and WH Smith that's able to diversify and offer a much broader range of products in order to sustain themselves. So I think it's just having that awareness, isn't it, about what's going on in the markets as well. And I mean, in the social care space, it can be a challenging market right now. It is, you know, we're a large provider, so we're able to ride the storms. A lot of small startup providers have found it a great deal more challenging. But the opportunities are still out there. We've got new care homes opening every year. and new social care businesses starting up every year. So again, if they've got the passion and they've got the right model that appeals to the consumer, then there is a way forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. And finally, Rob, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do so?
It's a metaphor for something much bigger, but look up and look around you. So the metaphor there is if you spend your time looking down at your own shoes, you're not gonna be able to take in and find the opportunities when they present themselves. And
Yes.
it's grab those opportunities. I'll do an adage to that, which is I've worked on the mantra that I will learn on the job. If the opportunity presents itself, never ever constrain yourself. Take the opportunities and learn on the job. You will succeed if you care about what you're doing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Rob, it's been fascinating talking to you, and your passion for what you do comes across, in everything you said. And I'd like to thank you for your time today, and also for the care that you're giving my mother at the moment, and I'm sure that comes from all my family. And for anyone that's interested in getting in touch with you or Anchor Homes, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, so you can find us on www.anchor.org.uk, and all my details and the organisation's details are on there. I should say we're a not-for-profit organisation as well, so all the money that we generate goes back into providing great care services. And can I just say as well, thank you for reaching out to me, Chris. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and it goes without saying we really enjoy taking care of your mum.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure too.
Cheers.